Good afternoon, everybody, and a very happy new year. My name is Greg Beaton, and I lead on the project, the Defra project. Thank you so much for so many joining us today. This is our first webinar of 2022, and we are going to run for the next 30 to 40 minutes. We've got a particular emphasis today on the sustainable farming incentive, and my colleague Lottie Hill is here, who's going to be talking to us about that later on. So before we get going, just to say this is being recorded, so anybody can watch this afterwards, and please do share it with other colleagues. We do encourage as much participation as possible. In the bottom of the screen, you should see a Q&A button. You can't ask questions live using your voice, but you can type them in there. So please do type those, and as we go through, we'll try and answer them as we go on, and there'll be a chance at the end to pick them up as well and review them. So please do participate as much as possible. We have a mixed audience today. So some people are joining us new, who are thinking about signing up with us. Some other people have probably already had a visit or are looking to understand more about the SFI. So the first part, if we move on to the next slide, please. Oops. The first slide, the first part of the meeting is going to be running through the process. So those of you who have seen this before, please go and make a cup of tea and come back in about 15 minutes time. But for everybody else, we'll run through the project, we'll run through the transition period, we'll run through our particular approach, and then we'll move on to 5 or 6 slides and questions around sustainable farming incentive. We'll finish off by talking about how to sign up and then any further questions and answers. Okay, so next slide, please. So we're all here today as part of the Future Farming Resilience Fund. This is Defra's project to help support farmers through the 7-year agricultural transition period. And the aim of the project is to really ensure that farmers understand what these changes will mean for their business, they feel supported, feel confident, and are encouraged to move forward and make change if required as we go forward. So there were 3 phases of this project. The first pilot phase ran in 2020. The interim phase, which is this phase now, is a short phase. It was due to finish in the end of February. It's now going to be extended a little bit into the summer to enable the 9,000 or so farmers that Defra want to sign up to have signed up. Then the main phase of the project, that starts in the autumn of this year and will run for 2.5 or 3 years. The idea is that farmers can engage with all phases. You don't have to make a choice. And we at Brown&Co certainly will be working with farmers across all phases as well. Next slide, please. So it's been a bit of a confusing time over the last 18 months, lots of announcements, lots of sort of changes, indications of change, papers on policy. The top right-hand wheel really shows all the initiatives that started in 2021. And one of those in the top right-hand side is this project, the Future Farm Resilience Fund. Next slide, please. The big challenge that a number of farmers will face, if not most farmers, will be the loss of BPS. We know 2027 is the last year it'll be received. It seems to have been there a long time. That check that arrives in December, and it was on time this year for most, that's going to start declining. By 2024, it will be down to less than 50% of its value. In the pilot phase, when we were working with 700 farmers, our survey results show that over half of those did not think they'd be profitable without BPS. We know that profitability does go up and down in agriculture, but on a sustained basis, all farms need to be profitable. And so this is the idea of the support to help ensure that farmers who remain in the sector are profitable. As part of working with us, you will get a little table at the bottom of this slide here that explains and shows how your BPS reductions will affect you. Next slide, please. Lots of numbers on this slide. What I wanted to point out here really was there's a lot of activity starting in the late part of 2021 and moving into 2022. So direct payments start to reduce. We're expecting news at some point around the lump sum exit scheme coming. Lots of different parts of the environmental schemes that are either being piloted or starting in earnest, and we'll talk more about those later on. We've then got a number of grant rounds that have started and will continue to roll out at different scales through this year. And then we've got animal health and welfare schemes and other schemes coming. So it's a busy time, 2021 and 2022. So just a little bit about Brown&Co, which is the next slide. We have a number of offices through the country, and we're delivering this project across the whole of the country. We have professionals across different disciplines, and we think that our ability to work not just with ag business consultants, but with land agents, with our property and commercial team, and particularly with our environmental team, Lottie being one of that team, is really important. So we can bring together skills and specialisms for all farm situations. We were the largest delivery provider in the pilot phase, and are certainly up there as probably the second largest in this phase. So we're working with a lot of farmers. We bring a lot of that experience to this project. Next slide, please. Just a little bit on our delivery mechanism. So core to our delivery mechanism is one-to-one support. We know from all the work we did and all the feedback we had from the 700 or 800 farmers in our pilot phase, that was the bit that farmers wanted most. And so core to our approach is receiving an on-farm meeting, the ability to sit down for a morning or an afternoon with an experienced advisor. It might be around the table, it might be with other family members, it might be walking around the farm. But that's core to our delivery. We also understand and increasingly seeing that social change is very much part of the 7-year transition period. Thinking about succession, thinking about family structures, thinking about new initiatives and who's going to drive those in the family business. And that's something we put quite a lot of emphasis on as well. So we've got about 40 consultants working on this over the next few months, and we would assign consultants to individual farms based on particular skill sets. Next slide, please. So as part of our delivery, and this is just a showcase, every farmer will receive a report, and part of that resilience report is looking at the finances of the business. Most farmers are very happy to share that, but some are less comfortable. That's fine. We can work around that. We don't have to have that information, but it helps. But primarily, we're looking at producing some observations, some action plans for progress, for change, for enabling uptake of grants or environmental schemes, or thinking about increasing or improving productivity or efficiencies. And this is all part of the report. This next slide shows another part of our report that we call the resilience benchmark. And we think there are 6 factors that are really important to understand within a business. The first being around performance, the second around how diversified a business is, because non-farm income is increasingly important to try and sort of even out the ups and downs of yields and commodity prices. Looking at social change is another important area. The environment is the 4th one, and particularly with the move towards public money for public good, understanding what the opportunities are for all farms in these areas. The 5th one, thinking about financial performance. All businesses need to be profitable and to moving forward with a strong balance sheet. And the last one starts to look at value creation and thinking, are there areas there that you may not have thought about? These might be around solar or about developing a particular building or new enterprises. So we pull those together to produce a benchmark for the business that's a guide as to where to put efforts and focus going forward. Next slide, please. One of the things that went down very well in our pilot phase was producing case studies, and we're doing this again. So these case studies aim to showcase anonymized but real examples of how farmers are thinking and planning about change. What are the drivers? What are the areas? What is the process? And we'll be sharing those over the next month or so from everybody involved in this project. And this one happens to be on a farmer who was looking to maximise income streams from carbon capture. Next slide, please. A little bit on process. If you sign up with us, we will then send you an information pack that sets out the areas that we'd like you to prepare in advance, and sets out our process within the scheme. We then will get one of the core project team members, will give you a call to run through a couple of very lightweight surveys that take 5 to 10 minutes that we need to do. And that enables us also to understand a little bit about your business, and enables us then in stage 4 to assign an appropriate consultant to you. We'll give you a call and get to know you, understand a bit about your business, and plan your visit, which is stage 5. And that visit is key. It's very much down to farmers to really sort of decide what they want to get out of that visit, where you want to put emphasis. We can be very flexible on putting more emphasis in some areas and less in others. There's no absolute blueprint for those meetings. And we've had a lot of farmers who ask us if we can put more emphasis on looking at an environmental scheme, or more emphasis on looking at their opportunities for grant applications. We can do that. After that visit, you'll receive a copy in the post of the report. The consultant will give you a call, run you through it, make sure you're happy with it, and then see whether you need any help or support in delivering any of the actions within it. At the end of the report, the end of the project, which is likely to be in the next 2 or 3 months, we get another call as a catch up to understand again progress, and to see whether any further support is required. That also could be a good point to segue into requirements for the main phase of the project when that starts later this year. Next slide, please. So just a couple of slides here just on where we are working. So this just gives a guide. So the yellow area is sort of the eastern part of the country, but we've got a fair bit of work. Examples, we're working, the green area is the southwest. There's approaching 70 farmers that we're working with down there. So a question that often comes up is, where are you working in the country? The answer really is all over it. We tend to not work in Cumbria, Lancashire, but the rest of the country we have coverage and are already working in. So we've got a very good local knowledge across most of England. Next slide, please. A few snippets of feedback from farmers. I'll give you a chance to have a little bit read through those. I think some of the messages coming out here are around really making sure that farmers have not missed any opportunities. Sitting down with that consultant, you can make sure that you're not missing out on any grant schemes or missing out on any environmental schemes. You understand what's on offer. Yeah, whether you take them up is down to you as the farmer, but at least you understand what the options are. Some farmers just feel as though they want to talk, they want to have a conversation and just share some of the challenges of today. Bottom right-hand box is a good example where actually the whole of the family got together. Something that doesn't always happen on a farm, but it's a good opportunity to have those family discussions and to have somebody to help facilitate those. So good feedback so far. Generally, certainly in my experience, every farmer we've worked with has got something very positive out of the meetings. Next slide, please. This one just looks at just running through just a few general observations that we're picking up on farm. I thought it'd be useful just to put these in. So one thing that we often find is just a lack of detail to actually understand which enterprises are performing and which are not. And that's something that I would say comes up in probably 50% of the cases of farms that certainly I've been working with. Accounts all generally also well outdated. So we're looking backwards. We want to put more emphasis on looking forwards, and that's something that we do. There's a lot of interest in tourism, but there's some caveats there around caution, around ensuring that there is the real opportunity for any particular tourist enterprise and who's going to drive it. Everybody's talking about environmental schemes. We'll come on to those, and understanding through the myriad of announcements what's available now, what's going to be available later this year. Quite a lot of emphasis now on security of land tenure, and understanding what can be entered into if land tenure is less than 5 years. And also trying to encourage those joined up conversations with landlords around, joint ambition setting. That's something that we like to try and enable. And then the last one, thinking about retirement. A significant proportion of farmers in the UK are aging and thinking about succession and retirement, and understanding how that might happen and what the business needs to produce, and how it might not, the lump sum could come into that when we hear more about that. So those are the sorts of things that we're talking about and focusing on farm. Next slide, please. Don't we have any questions? Do we have any? No questions yet. Okay. So I wanted to put this slide in just before. This is the last slide before we go on to the environmental, the BSFI. Just so we're clear, and we're just communicating where we are with the grant schemes. So the Farm Investment Fund, some of these are live now. So within that is the Farm Equipment and Technology Fund. That's been open for a number of weeks now. It actually closes, I think, the day after tomorrow, the 7th of January. So if anybody hasn't seen the list, do have a look at the list. See whether there's any equipment on there that you think you might be interested in, and need to just put in the application within the next couple of days. There's a list there of about 135 items, and the grant covers 40% of the cost. On the right-hand side of the slide are the larger grant funds under the Farm Transformation Fund. The first one is around water resource management, which is live at the moment. And probably there are going to be a limited number of applications for that. These are for on-farm reservoirs or infrastructure associated with water movement around the farm. Two-stage process, 12th of January, deadline for that. We then have already got the manual produced for the farm productivity, which is the second of the Farm Transformation Fund. So it's the second big fund. The manual is out. The eligibility checker is likely to start in a couple of weeks' time. So that one is coming and will run for 8 weeks. So this is going to be thinking about automation around harvesting, weeding, milking, lighting, slurry ammonia management. And then the third one, which probably may be of more interest to a wider group, will come in the spring. And this is the adding value to farm produce element, which is around it could be around processing, it could be around some form of infrastructure around maintaining farm produce to a high quality to enable it to be sold for a high net return. So that we don't know exactly the detail yet, but that's coming in the spring. All of these will be repeated again at the end of the year and early next year. So in 12 months' time, they'll come round again for those who don't manage to get on top this time. If you want any more info on them, do let us know, or these are things that we can talk about in the meetings. So have we got any questions? I'm just looking at the bottom here. No questions as yet. Okay, fine. That's fine. So with that, I hope I've rattled through the sort of the administrative side of things. I now want to move on to the SFI and allow Lottie to now talk us through the next few slides. And please do ask as many questions as you can, and we will answer these as we go through. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. As Greg has previously mentioned, there are lots of different grants available that are out there. It's just knowing which one to apply. Sustainable farming incentive is kind of more of a newer information, so I thought it's probably best to outline it today. So it's the first of the 3 elements that's going to make up the environmental land management scheme. So you've got kind of the sustainable farming incentive. The next one up from that is the local nature recovery one, and then the landscape nature recovery. Defra's aim is to get up to 70% of all farmers to be signed up to this by 2028, which is an ambitious target, but one will see what will happen. the information that we released lately is very much the starting point. More standards are going to be added. I'll have a quick talk through of the standards that are available later. And it's very still much a learning process. So the final version of the Sustainable Farming Incentive is likely to be released in late 2024, 2025. So this is very much a learning process as they go on. The Sustainable Farming Incentive pilot, which was released back in August, is separate to this. And those schemes are kind of have more standards available. But this one is likely to be opening in spring. At the moment, it's said around after the VPS window, around the same time as the countryside stewardship window. So you've got information available to you to make a decision which one you want to go to. Agreement's meant to be starting with the 1st of September, and first payments made in 2022. Next slide, please. Excellent. So some rules about this. So one of the things that I think is really interesting is they're looking at paying quarterly rather than yearly. Previous with BPS, countryside stewardship, any of these other schemes, yearly payments are great, but once you've done quite a lot of work, you're waiting for a long time for that money to be compensated, and paying quarterly will hopefully mean that payments are slightly more on time and that sort of thing. All the land within the scheme has to be in England. And another kind of main component of the SFI is the land operates on a parcel-based option as opposed to the whole farm. So you've got your whole holding, you don't have to enter all of it in. You can have maybe half of it included in the SFI under a certain standard. You may have other parcels with another standard. You may be able to cross them over. It's flexible in what you want to put in an approach. There's got to be at least 2 years left for tenants within a scheme, and if you've got these 2 years left in your tenancy, you don't need to get a landlord's permission to enter into the Sustainable Farming Incentive. The payment levels that you choose to go into will be fixed, and the scheme lasts for 3 years. There is the intention if as more standards become available, and throughout the scheme you can add them onto the Sustainable Farming Incentive that you've got going. And they're more looking at kind of adding ones on as opposed to taking away. But again, that's to be clarified. And one of the key components of this is you can layer it with countryside stewardship. So what this means, you can't be paid to do the same action twice. For example, when we look at the soil standard, you can't be paid under countryside stewardship to put cover crops in and to account 20% of your winter cover. But what you can potentially do is, if you've not already got cover crops under countryside stewardship, that's absolutely fine. Or looking at if you've got a certain wildlife element, such as having nectar mixers in, you can't get paid to do the same thing twice, but you can have them separately. Next slide, please. So, as I said, not all standards will be available, but the main three that are going to be out there is the arable and horticultural soil standard, the improved grassland soil standard, the moorland standard, and then on top of that, there's the animal health and welfare review. I'll start with this one. This will give an opportunity to have a paid vet visit out to your farm with different rates depending on the livestock that you keep, to discuss animal health, use of medicines, and to undertake diagnostic tests. So the idea is they will produce a report, and these visits can happen annually to really kind of improve the health and welfare of the stock on the farm. The next one, the moorland standard, is kind of the first of its kind. There's not really been any payment for moorlands previously under countryside stewardship. That's worthy. And you're looking at £148 a hectare. Now, because this is still being finalised, this is very much an evidence collecting standard. So we'll be looking at the different soil types that are already there, evaluating the public goods of the peatland that's already there and how to enhance these. Again, this is more likely not to be applicable to a majority of farms, but for ones that have been struggling, especially in the uplands, this is going to be good. The other two standards focus a lot on soil, and they have similar components, different payment rates. So the arable horticultural soil standard starts at £22 a hectare on the introductory scale, and then goes on intermediate and 40. Soil testing is an important component of both of these. You've got to be testing for organic matter at least once every 5 years. If you've already recently undertaken these, they can be included, or you'll have to do new soil tests. And once you've got these soil tests, writing in a soil assessment and management plan within the first year is essential. This will identify areas at risk of soil erosion, where winter cropping will be most applicable, and where you can increase the organic matter. Depending on then on the standard that you're in, the levels of organic matter that you're going to need on the soils is going to increase, and for winter crops. Such as in the intermediate level, you'll be looking at, of the percentage of the land underneath the winter cover, 20% will have to be in a multi-species lay, or green cover crops will be included. We've not got a huge amount of information on the advanced level yet, but it's likely to include a minimum till requirement. And then again, with the improved soil standard, it's quite similar in terms of what's required on the introductory level. And when we get to the intermediate level, again, there's certain specific lays that they want to see due to species richness, including certain components of the soil. So that's a very brief overview of that. This is likely to open it in spring. You can layer it with your countryside stewardship scheme. It's very much a starting base. There things will potentially change, and it's not the final product. If we can have the next slide, please.
Oh yeah. Just see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I might answer these by these ones. So we'll have a quick look at these. So the agreement's meant to be lasting for 3 years, but every 12 months you can kind of add more levels of ambition and more standards. But applications, I see someone's asked here, applications open for SFIs. We're imagining after the BPS deadline, so after the 15th of May. The previously said it'll be open about the same time as countryside stewardship. Countryside stewardship information is normally released in February, with the application period closing in July. So you can compare the two, see what you can do in each schemes and see how they fit. Again, we're looking at the quarterly payments, and it will work in for tenants as well. I see that Eddie Gent has asked a question saying, if you have an existing mid-tier and feel that the SFI may be better for you, can you move to the SFI before the mid-tier term ends? So that's a great question. So what we can do within this is that you can, within your existing mid-tier, have the sustainable farming incentive on top of it. And you might find that some of the soil standards works quite well. So you could get an extra £22, £40 per hectare. Once this kind of trial run of the SFI ends and the new existing new scheme will be launched in, say, 2024, 2025, if you're in a mid-tier agreement, you will have the option to exit early without any penalties and go into the SFI if it's more advantageous for you. We don't yet know the interaction between the mid-tier schemes and the SFI in 2024, 2025, but at the moment, this is the situation. Couple more questions.
So there's a couple of questions on registering, which I think are for the project that we'll talk about when we've finished the SFI questions. I've got a few questions here that have come in as well that I'll ask Lottie, but maybe if Lottie goes through her questions on the slide that we can all see, and then I'll come to the other questions that have come in as well from attendees.
Just originally, it's one of the frequently asked questions is, yes, if you've got a countryside stewardship, you can still apply, and the same for if you're in a HLS as well, so that's a higher level of stewardship, but Defra won't pay for the same thing twice. So you'll need to think about evidence keeping and showing that. The agreement will last for 3 years, so starting in 2022 to 2025. And as soon as the standards are released, you can be adding those.
Okay.
Should we do that one as well? Yeah, we've had another question come in going, is there yet a definition of what plants will be considered a herbal lay? Straight answer, no, there isn't. But based on countryside stewardship and the other options that they've got before, you'll be looking at mixes with kind of maybe high levels of clover, birds foot trefoil. We can potentially have some ryegrass in there, anything that's nitrogen fixing. will be considered as kind of a herbal lay. I'm imagining the requirements might be quite similar to the option GS4, which is a species-rich herbal lay that you can look up if you want to look at the specific requirements. But at the moment, Defra have released just enough information to get by on. But things like in some of the soil standards, they haven't said what percentage of your land needs to be soil tested yet every year. So at the moment, it could be 100%, it could be 10% each year. We know it needs to be done, we just don't know all the finer details yet.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, so if I just put a couple of more questions that are coming to Lottie, one of them is a clarification. So the first one is around the range of standards on a particular farm, and can you confirm that you could have one field, and I'm assuming they're whole fields, a whole field in the entry level standard and the next field in the intermediate level standard? You can mix standards within your farm?
No, I don't think you can.
Okay.
But this, again, hasn't been confirmed. This is going off doing applications for the Sustainable Farming Incentive Pilot. So once you've chosen a level of standard, that's the same standard that needs to be across the whole farm.
Okay.
And you can't have the same, depending on what it is, the layering of which standards fit on the same parcels isn't exact.
Yeah. Okay. So probably we're waiting for more clarification on that. It could be quite complex, I guess, if they do have different standards on different fields on the same farm.
It wouldn't be Defra if it wasn't complex sometimes.
No. And just on changing, I think the first question there answers this one, that you can go up in your level of ambition, but you can't come down.
I think that's the case. Yeah.
Okay. There was a question or a clarification around the winter cover. I think in a previous slide, it was 70% winter cover.
Yeah. So that doesn't necessarily have to be a cover crop. That can be winter cropping.
Right. Yes.
So yeah, if you're winter cropping anyway, you're sorted essentially. Yeah. But yeah.
I think that's quite important actually, because 70% looks quite onerous to go from not having any to having 70% if it was generous green cover, but winter cereal crops can count towards that. Yeah. Okay. There was another question around the advanced level of the soil standard. We don't have that yet.
No, so with the advanced level, they're wanting to incorporate minimum till and direct drilling. And at the moment, they haven't quite yet finalised the methodology for including this. Hence, we're still waiting to hear what the payment levels are.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. And so what we believe, we've got the soil standard for grassland and arable coming this next late spring. Yeah. But then the following year, we think there'll be other standards coming?
Yeah, so at the moment, they're all indicative, so they're not confirmed, but they're hoping in 2023 we'll have standards coming out for the hedgerows, nutrient management and integrated pest management. 2024, we're looking at potential agroforestry, so getting paid for the woodland that you've got, low and no input grassland, water body buffering, farmland biodiversity. And then 2025, they're looking at getting an organic standard in as well, which I know Leaf and the Soil Association have been lobbying quite hard for, on-farm woodland payments, heritage payments, dry stone walls, orchards and specialist horticulture. So there's a great range of different standards which they're aiming to be applicable to all farmers, all disciplines. But again, this list isn't confirmed. There could be more added. There could be some taken away. Time will tell.
So we very much see this as growing. As far as entry this next year, I don't think it's going to be too onerous for most farmers to enter the standards that are available in 2022.
And it's something everyone should be thinking about when they're completing their BPS, whether they can look at doing this.
Yeah, so what Lottie's really reinforcing there is at the time of BPS and at the time of maybe annual stewardship claims or new stewardship schemes, thinking about these holistically all together so that the best mix can be put forward. I think we are entering a period of the next 2 or 3 years. There's the opportunity for farmers to have stewardship, SFI and also BPS income. So actually, the next couple of years could provide that buffer for planning and change going forward, while we know that we've got those three income streams that are available to certainly most, if not all, farmers. So that is something to bear in mind.
Yeah, now's the time to interact and see all the different availability before they go.
Okay. One other question's come in. Can a whole crop mix be harvested with a combine? Any answer to that?
I'd say so, yes.
I'm not sure whether that's whole crop as part of a stewardship option. The main, I think the main emphasis on that is leaving the stubble over winter. And I guess as long as that remains, then that should be okay, I think. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any last questions on SFI before we just go on? There's one more that's coming actually just around. It's a Brown&Co centric question around our sort of ability to provide advice here, and I think that we're now in the rounds of some quite sort of complex decision making that combines both sort of traditional crop production and also maximising a range of environmental schemes that are available on farm. And I would say that certainly within Brown&Co, we can combine the expertise of our environmental scheme and our agriculturalists and others to produce the best outcome for farmers. And I think that's important. It's no longer looking at single operations or enterprises now. It's achieving the best mix across a range. And I think that's the change that's really happening right now through the transition period. Yeah.
And like making successful businesses is the core essentially of what we do. If the environmental scheme works, it will go for it. And we always look at we've got such a range of data. We can look at different net margins of crops and stewardship mixes, and hopefully we'll have figures for the different sustainable farming incentives. So you can make an informed decision when you ask for advice on how much these things are actually realistically going to cost and what your profit's going to be at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think the point there, and it came out in a meeting we had earlier today, is that we can provide the information, we can provide some guidance, but ultimately every farmer needs to decide on what they want to do going forward. But armed with the information, I think, is the key to this. Okay. Thank you, Lottie, very much for that. I'm sure it's informative and given lots of people food for thought. The last slide really is next steps. And we are still recruiting for this project. We've got about 100 or so places left that we want to fill in the next few weeks. So please do get in contact with us. You can either email us, you can call us, or you can go to the website. What we need initially is name, contact information, SBI number. We'll get back to you within 24 hours, and then the process will begin. And we will then get out to you in the next few weeks. Or you could say we don't want to see you until end of the shooting season or something similar. We're very happy to accommodate those sorts of things. And we will assign the most appropriate consultant to work with you. So please do look us up. Thank you all very much for listening. Please do share the recording of the video with anybody else. And we look forward to working with as many of you as possible. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.